Hola, hola a todas. Vamos a empezar ya con esta última sesión antes de la puesta en común, de las conclusiones del plenario que cerrará las jornadas. It's fine? Yeah? Okay. En esta mesa... ¿No? No translation. No translation, me dicen. ¿Sí? Vale. Bueno, pues... En esta mesa vamos a hablar sobre comunicación, sobre información, algo fundamental también y transversal a todo lo que se ha estado hablando desde ayer en la conferencia. Tenemos el privilegio de tener a 4 mujeres periodistas, reporteras, investigadoras de primer nivel. Vienen de Sudáfrica, de Nigeria, de Uganda y de Tanzania. Los medios de comunicación en África están siendo pioneros sobre todo en esos medios alternativos, en los medios online, que luego pues en Europa estamos replicando muchas de las cosas que se han hecho en África, que se llevan haciendo ya hace mucho tiempo, precisamente por la falta de recursos muchas veces. Y algunas de ellas, yo lo que vamos a hacer aquí hoy es que ir presentándoosla una a una, y cada una de ellas quiere hablar sobre algo muy en concreto, que creo que es interesante que lo expongan un poco, y luego ya podemos entrar en el debate. Los medios de comunicación en África, la lucha por ser rigurosos, ser precisos, profesionales, pues dependiendo de en qué contexto, es bastante más complicado que lo que podemos tener en algunos países como en España, ¿no? Y eso hace que precisamente el trabajo que hacen estas periodistas con las que vais a compartir este tiempo ahora mismo, pues que su trabajo sea muchísimo, bueno, yo creo que tenga un valor añadido, porque el esfuerzo muchas veces es mayor. En África no se trata solo de ir a una rueda de prensa y hacer preguntas, sino que hay que darles muchas vueltas para llegar a conseguir la información que los lectores se merecen. Vamos a empezar, vamos a ir en este orden directamente, y entonces le daré la palabra a Verashini Pillay. Ella es fundadora de Explain, que es un portal destinado a hacer más accesibles las noticias en Sudáfrica, pero también cubre el resto del continente. Y sobre todo centrada más en el sur. Fue redactora jefa de Mail and Guardian, también del HuffPost de Sudáfrica, y jefa de la sección de una radio también bastante rompedora que se llama Power FM. También trabajó como reportera cubriendo política nacional, y está especializada en gestión de medios digitales y ha recibido varios premios. Participó también en una charla TED para compartir su experiencia en el acoso cibernético como editora del Huffington Post en Sudáfrica. Ella nos va a hablar en concreto, lo que quiere contarnos es sobre todo un caso que seguramente habrá muchas personas aquí que conozcan y otras que no, porque el continente es enorme, y entonces, pues bueno, ella sobre todo quiere hablarnos sobre la corrupción de la familia Gupta en Sudáfrica, que se infiltró en el gobierno en su momento de Zuma, y que tuvo ya una serie de repercusiones y una serie de consecuencias también para los profesionales que estuvieron investigando sobre esta familia y sobre lo que había hecho y cómo qué influencia llegó a tener, que fue tremenda, sobre el gobierno sudafricano. Entonces, cómo se elaboraban todas esas informaciones. Gracias.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Carla, for that introduction. Hello to everyone. It's been so inspiring meeting all of you. So several studies have established the correlation between press freedom and democracy and development. Press freedom is important. It allows citizens to debate among each other. It aids freedom of expression. But most importantly, it helps combating corruption. And combating corruption is not just nice for us as citizens. It's crucial to our development in countries. It helps with foreign direct investment, which in turn aids development and citizens' well-being. So free press is crucial. And an example of this is what happened in my country, as Carla noted. In 2017, an explosive investigation landed in our newspapers. For about 10 years before that, there had been rumblings here and there of this family that had arrived from India with nothing really, and had in a short space of time become best friends with our president, and had their allies running various government departments and state-owned enterprises, and had amassed a massive amount of wealth in a very short space of time. And it turned out, from what we saw in this big investigative report, that it was all thanks to what you call pay to play, massive bribery on a level unforeseen before, where you were basically buying up ministers and ensuring that contracts were going to your companies. Their control over South Africa was something that was pushing us close to over the edge. A former finance minister, who was one of the people fighting against this family, put the cost of those 10 years of what we call state capture, which is this family's attempt to capture the state and extract as much money as possible from it. He put the cost of that directly at about $3 billion US. For a small developing country, that is a huge amount of money that we lost. But it was not just about the money we lost. We were downgraded several times by international credit ratings agencies until we became junk status. We lost a lot of the gains we had made before that, economically, developmentally. What my country went through was extremely challenging. But if it was not for a free media and investigative journalists who risked quite a lot, along with whistleblowers who risked their entire lives, we would never have found out about the full extent of what had happened, and we would not have seen the repercussions that later came to light. What were those repercussions? Well, the government associated with that family fell from grace. That president was basically forced out of power. A new president within his party, Cyril Ramaphosa, came to power, not perfect, but bent at getting accountability and cleaning out the rot. And we saw a state capture commission of inquiry take place in my country over 3 years. And 3 years is a long time, but we needed that much catharsis. My country loves talking. We love to talk about everything that happens to us endlessly, and I think that is one of our strengths. So we had the state capture inquiry over 3 years, where the extent of what had happened was unpacked, and it has been enormous. Our prosecuting authorities now trying to make prosecutions. They themselves were affected by what happened. They don't have good prosecuting authority, but it's starting to happen. But key corporate companies were also involved. Often we think of African governments being corrupt in isolation. No, there's people in the private sector, international companies helping them, and they often evade accountability, not this time. So you had international consulting companies, KPMG, McKinsey's, SAPS, which is a software company, were making tens of millions of dollars in consulting fees from bogus deals, sending consultants to do who knows what at our state-owned enterprises. They suffered huge reputational damage. McKinsey's has now promised to pay about almost nearly $200 million back to South African state-owned enterprises. And that is a direct result of us pushing back as citizens via our free media, which has led to these accountability ramifications, has led to some form of justice being done. And that is why communication is so important. And yet, across the world, we are seeing a pushback against journalism, right? A pushback against a free press, not just in the global south, everywhere. We heard from Belarus's leader of the opposition yesterday. What her country has gone through has been shocking. And we saw it under Donald Trump. A free media is being punished because no longer do dictators seize power through coups as often as they used to. We are fighting a digital war and information war. It's better to get power and stay in power through so-called legal means, getting into power, changing the constitution, silencing journalists. And you silence journalists in many ways. You put friendly people in place to run the companies. You jail journalists. You shut down the internet when it comes to voting time. We see this happening in African elections again and again. And there's a sexism component to this. In my country, the journalists who spoke out against what was happening were attacked, especially female journalists. A global PR company called Bell Pottinger was hired by the Gupta family to fight their battle. They claimed they were not responsible for this, but there were thousands, if not more, social Twitter bots, fake accounts that would sell the story that what the Gupta family was doing was to empower the black majority in South Africa, and they made it about racism. It wasn't about racism, it was about corruption. But they would attack female journalists too. One of our most top female journalists, Feral Hafaji, wrote that they would repeatedly tweet pictures of her that had been photoshopped. The images had me, or a very badly photoshopped version, on the lap of one of our most wealthy business people in South Africa who happens to be white. There was one of him walking a dog with my face plastered on the dog. Another of him milking a cow with a human face, my face. The attack is patriarchal and gendered. I am the woman as cow and bitch. The contrivers could not get more stereotypical if they tried. And that is how women were treated who tried to report that story. In other countries, women are treated even worse. We know what happens in Mexico, women journalists, I mean. And these people are at the forefront of holding our governments accountable, and they should be allowed to do their job. So I think I'm probably running close to out of time. Yeah. Okay, I just want to just say some last words. Only 13% of the world's population enjoys a free press, according to Freedom House, that does an index every year. That was 2017. 45% of the world lives in countries where the media environment is not free. And in Africa, countries like Zimbabwe, Burundi, DRC, and South Sudan are some of the worst affected. If we are able to take communication and journalism seriously, we will see these countries starting to thrive. Thank you.
Bueno, ahora vamos a pasar la palabra a Vanessa Adi-Ofion. Ella es periodista nigeriana de la CNN. Tiene una amplia experiencia en periodismo transfronterizo, también de investigación, científico y de desarrollo. Ahora mismo, como comentaba, es periodista de esta cadena de televisión estadounidense en el equipo de As Equals, y donde precisamente trabajan lo que es la desigualdad de género sistemática. Ha colaborado con varios medios y publicado en medios especializados como el British Medical Journal y la revista Africa in Fact de Good Governance Africa. También ha sido galardonada con varios premios, entre ellos destaca el premio a los periodistas del año de la Fundación para el Desarrollo de los Medios de Comunicación en África. Ella nos va a hablar de los medios alternativos para comunicar en África durante los procesos electorales, también aprovechando que en su país va a haber elecciones. Bueno, este año, lo que queda de este año y el año que viene, va a haber varios procesos muy interesantes en el continente de elecciones electorales, y también sobre las herramientas, ¿no?, de comunicación que se usan en las comunidades locales, precisamente donde se intentan meter, que sean más inclusivas y que también haya un espacio para la comunicación, para el comentario, para la opinión. Tienes la palabra.
Hi everyone, good morning. I'm happy to be here. I've chosen to speak about communication for grassroots, and this for me should be deliberate and not just some random thing going. Because I think that communication as it exists, or the media as it exists currently, is still very much elitist and targeting a particular audience. I chose to talk about this because of elections coming up in a lot of African countries, maybe from the end of this year until next year, and the role that women play in our electoral processes. A lot of the times, they're useful to give them pittance for their votes, and the journalism that we do, I do not think informs them enough. Therefore, I'm advocating and calling on us as journalists, as civil society organizations, to reconsider the structure of our communication at these crucial times in our governments. As we're calling on women to participate, we also need to be giving the women on the grassroots the right kind of information that we need to empower them to make the right choices. And I am looking at what collaborations currently exist as a United Nations organization, as a locally funded civil society organization. Are we looking at institutions like universities, for instance, theater departments that have as part of their curriculum theater for development? Is it possible for us to look at those institutions and see what collaborations we can work with? We can come up with them, you know, to take community to theater, to take theaters to communities that also can provide instant feedback and change that we can measure. Is it possible for us to see what community radio programs exist at the moment that we can fund and support? Because even funding at the moment is for media that do not necessarily reach grassroots communication. I mean, I was just talking with her a moment ago, and she was telling me for her organization, if she wants funding for grassroots work, it's very, very insignificant compared to what she gets for politicians who are at the national level, or it's non-existent at all. So is it possible for us as funders to begin to reconsider the projects that we're funding and who is benefiting from the funds that we're generating? Is it possible for us as academia to not just send press releases to media houses, but to ensure that the journalists are carried from the get-go of when you conceive those researches that you want to work on? You're carrying us along, you're letting us be a part of the process so that we can also make our own decisions and generate our own perspectives about the work that you're doing. We're at an era where data journalism is a big deal. Solutions journalism is also a big deal. And as researchers and as journalists, I think we're all advocating the same thing. We're all gunning for the same results. We're just using different platforms. Is it possible for us to begin to synergize more rather than work separately and then just feed the media the news? Can they be a part of your process until when you achieve the results that you're working to achieve? Is it possible for us as theater filmmakers to carry our projects and the work that we have done as traveling groups to these communities so that they can see themselves in the work that we're creating rather than reserve those screenings for Cannes and events like this? Can we go show those communities what it is like? Somebody talked about collaboration between Latin America and Africa. Is it possible that these things are not shown to just audiences like us? Because I've participated in some of these projects, and it's interesting to see, as actresses, as actors, you're dialoguing amongst yourself, but the audience is joining in. They're correcting your views that you have conceived wherever you are to come and show to them. And they're saying to you, no, in our community, this is not it. They're around you after you've done your stage productions to tell you what it is exactly that they're going through, which for me is the kind of inclusivity that we want to see more at the development level rather than the charity approach, where you think you know the problems that these people are going through and you have the solutions to them. But they can give you instant feedback. And it's maybe even less expensive than conducting the surveys that you're paying for as international organizations for independent researchers on the local level to carry out. You're there and you can see for yourself what it is, and you can hear directly from the people that you're targeting to benefit from the work that you're doing. There are also churches on ground. I know that churches like the Catholic Church is very much on ground, providing health services and other sort of social services to communities that are at the grassroots. Is it possible for us as communicators, as advocates, to liaise with these kinds of people and move away from our own immediate community? Because the goal is that every human being is able to impact from the work that we're doing. Is it possible for us to go beyond, our comfort zones to these other networks that are working in the areas that we would like to see change and impact? I'm not sure if I still have some time, so maybe, okay, so, as heads of organizations, I think a lot of us need to also mentor, in that you look at some of the reporting that we're doing in media houses as journalists. Once we leave a certain level, or we rise above certain levels of our careers, that's where it stops. And I'm saying so for my own media house where I worked in Nigeria. After I resigned, there was nobody else going to those grassroots communities to do those reports. And those reports, they resonate with people, whoever reads them. I mean, I remember a story I worked on girls dropping out of school because they were being raped on their way to school. So Nigeria at the time had the highest out-of-school children, and this was a time where these girls deliberately wanted to go to school. They were trekking 2 hours to and fro to school in another state, but had to drop out because some of them even got pregnant as a result. Thankfully, people read that story. They got funding to build roads, to build hospitals, and to renovate their schools. But because there was no continuation, so that media house is not doing that kind of story anymore. It's a man who's trying to do it, but the nuanced perspective that a woman would report that kind of story is missing. And when the editor is also a man, it's not told as richly as it should be told. So that's something we also need to look at, to mentor younger people, you know, so that they can carry on the kind of work for impact that we would like to see happen in our in the media landscape.
Thank you.
Okay.
Gracias. Bueno, como veis, estamos intentando que vayan a temas y a aspectos muy, muy concretos de lo que es la profesión periodística, la comunicación, precisamente para que, bueno, para luego en las preguntas podemos profundizar, por supuesto, en algunas de las cosas que nos están contando, pero la idea es intentar no generalizar y que ellas, con la experiencia que tienen, pues nos puedan trasladar directamente las situaciones en las que se han encontrado. Ahora pasaré la palabra a Rosbel Kagumier. Ella es periodista ugandesa, directora de African Feminist, es escritora también, activista, bloguera, feminista panafricana y estratega de comunicaciones multimedia. También es experta en derechos humanos, género, paz y conflictos. Escribe en The Guardian, en Al Jazeera, entre otros medios. Trabajó en Women's Link Worldwide, allí estableciendo estrategias para comunicar temas que van desde la violencia sexual, la trata de personas, los derechos sexuales y reproductivos y la discriminación. El tema en el que se va a centrar ella son las plataformas digitales como herramientas de comunicación para las mujeres que se están organizando, y también la participación en los foros, ¿no?, para combatir precisamente todos esos discursos contra los derechos de las mujeres que existen también en el continente. Tienes la palabra.
Gracias. I wanted to start from the fact that what the previous speakers have talked about, the important role of media and what media represents in our communities, in our countries, in terms of connecting us, but also in terms of, you know, leaving some people behind and continuing several discriminations that we have inherited as a people. So I worked as a journalist in Uganda for many years in the newsrooms in Uganda, and until I didn't feel like my voice was well heard or appreciated in the space. And I started working more with alternative media platforms, like blogging platforms, online media, in trying to develop alternative ways that we could actually bring issues that were specifically, intentionally refused in the media. And we all know the way the media continues to cover women is very wanting. The way media covers queer Africans is even more violent. It upholds the existing patriarchal standards of the day and is interested in regurgitating power rather than creating a platform where marginalized voices can be heard. So I'm very interested in alternative media, in how young Africans are pushing back. Even when there are changes in the media that are so slow, sometimes you can't wait for an established foundation to make the changes in order to deliver your freedom. So a lot of young people in the continent are using online platforms to make themselves heard. If you know how you use social media today, I think when you wake up, what's the first thing? Where do you get your news? Certainly not a TV, not a radio. The first place you go to is your WhatsApp group. That's where you first find out what is happening in the community, in the country, internationally. So how we consume information, how we communicate has changed massively over the last 10 years and is so relevant in Africa. So young people are using online platforms like Twitter, Facebook, WhatsApp to create community, to push back on narratives that have been held for a long time. And as an editor of a platform called African Feminism, I've been working with different writers from the continent and activists to make themselves heard, to make their narrative known, which oftentimes will not be entertained in the mainstream media. So we have managed to cover very many stories on the continent, but for me in particular, interest has been on how young women are using these platforms to make themselves heard, to create communities, but also away, both online and offline. In early 2020, shortly before the pandemic started, we woke up in the early of the year, just at the start of the year, young women in Uganda used Twitter to expose men who had raped them. This was the first time in Uganda, very many young people, these girls were between 18 and 25. All they needed was their Twitter handle and to say, this happened to me and this is the person. It changed because oftentimes we cover rape and sexual violence and GBV, gender-based violence, as something that happens to women. Even in the media, even in our discourse. We refuse to deliberate on who is doing that. We don't have a face of a perpetrator. But with the current, the past few years of Me Too movement, we have seen that young people have actually been very brave to come on these social media and say, this is the person. So when this happened, hundreds of girls who couldn't even speak out started using social media to tell those who had spoken out, this happened to me, but I'm not in position to speak. When that happened, those who were very vocal were targeted. They were targeted. People started sending them death threats, rape threats, and defamation lawsuits. So speaking out, communicating on these platforms is an opportunity, but also it poses new threats for young women. And what I learned oftentimes is that a lot of organizations working on rights, whether it's civil liberties or even women's rights organizations, they have no clue what is happening online. And we watch, as a person online, you rarely find women over 45 using social media to push back. So what happens? Then all these young people get the burden, they feel the burden of their communication. There's no one to amplify, to say, I've seen this before, I've been here since 20 years, and you're right, to affirm them. It's almost that they're doing this on their own. So when their rights are violated, there's not even organizations to respond in time. So I've worked a lot with, what we call mutual aid groups. When a young woman speaks out and is attacked, we respond, trying to find lawyers for them. It's very important to recognize the role social media plays in the lives of young people and queer Africans, but also the kind of realities they face in terms of pushback. And this pushback is not just localized, it is, transnational groups that are pushing back against women's rights and queer rights. So in our communications, we should always ask ourselves, where is the conversation taking place? Am I there? What can I bring? How do we defend the freedom of many marginalized in this time? I will end with talking about a case I covered highly in the last 4 years of a Ugandan academic, Dr. Stella Nyanzi. When she spoke against the president, she uses her Facebook platform to speak about the president, to hold him accountable of the election promises he had made. He had made a promise to provide free sanitary towels for young girls, and he didn't. And she took to her Facebook and abused the president, used her power of poetry and words, and called the president a pair of buttocks. So you can imagine when people agree with you that accountability is good, but they think you should be civil and nice woman when you're talking. So the whole country called her crazy. Women's movements didn't want anything to do with her. Guess who was doing the work of actually telling the story why her voice matters? Young Ugandan feminist activists. She was thrown into jail, and she spent 14 months in jail. And people were painting her as crazy, as somebody who shouldn't be listened to. And we were able to sustain her story. And she's right now an actor, and she's there on her own accord. And you have to respect. People don't have to they don't have to speak with civility when they are holding you accountable. People don't owe you civility, young people or anybody. As long as they are holding power accountable is what matters. So I think that we have to learn like how young women are organizing in the role of these platforms in pushing back and creating different communities. Thank you so much.
Ahora le pasaremos la palabra a Ceselela Valisilia. Ella es periodista tanzana, fundadora de Regalia Media Consult, también galardonada y especialista en comunicación con más de 20 años de experiencia en la presentación de mensajes a través de diversas plataformas de comunicación. Ha centrado también su carrera en la gestión de comunicación, trabajando como consultora con varias agencias de la ONU, con ONGs, instituciones académicas, gobiernos y organizaciones internacionales. Ella nos va a hablar sobre la violencia de género en las redes sociales a las que se enfrentan las mujeres que ejercen la política y también ese papel que debemos jugar las periodistas para reducir el abuso que sufren muchas de ellas. Tienes la palabra.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. I'm happy to attend this forum, which has been very informative to me in many aspects. Since yesterday, in some of our discussions, we have been discussing issues of gender-based violence, and this is what I'm going to focus today, in particular, focusing on women in politics, because this is a problem that faces women all over the continent, I would say. Women leaders, especially who are in politics, are subject to gender-based violence online and abuse. And this affects them psychologically, physical, and sexual. And for example, in our country in 2015 general elections, about 3/4, which is 69% of women candidates, reported that they had experienced abusive language during elections campaign, online and offline. For instance, bullying, verbal harassment, insults, and being booed while on stage. But this has consequences, and one of it is tarnishing their hard-earned reputation, tarnishing names, lowering self-esteem of victims, not only online, but even in their offline life. Yeah, another issue is that we all know that women politics figures are role models for young girls and women who aspire to pursue the career politics. But when these political figures are abused and harassed online, those young girls wishing to become politicians, are highly discouraged from pursuing the same path. But as media, we have a role to play, to make sure somehow we minimize this. We cannot say that we can finish this, but at least we can do something as our way of promoting human rights and equality. And in our newsrooms, we can do things like balancing our stories to try as much as possible to make our story, to carry both sides, to include the relevant sources, to get full information from the stories. We can also try to be accurate, use of light languages, because we know if a gender-based violence story will carry all the essential information, it makes it easy for relevant authorities to make a follow-up and act. Yeah, we would also try to avoid judgmental language. We'll try to continue learning to acquire more knowledge on evolving issues in areas of online gender-based violence, because we have the responsibility to learn and get updated as much as possible on these issues that are evolving every day, because with the digital platform, every day things are coming up new. So we need to be continuous, aware, and learning to acquire more knowledge in order to cope up with the information that we want to serve our audience. Also, about continuing writing about gender-based violence, we should not wait for an incident to happen. We can still continue writing on issues of gender-based violence, about to educate the public, to let them know about their rights, what the Constitution say, what legal frameworks are saying to safeguard their gender violence acts. But in the course of doing this, we have challenges. We have a lot of challenges, and one of it is majority of journalists, we face the challenge of lack of enough knowledge on online digital platforms and how it operates. This is a setback because it makes us not to report the way it is supposed to be reported, and maybe it might hinder the quick actions to be taken by the relevant authorities. Also, issues of culture, norms, and customs in these countries, you know, to some extent, because they have this way of neglecting the sufferings of women. Therefore, their problems are not given weight they deserve. And this also impacts even in our reporting, because we cannot write a well-balanced story. And also victims of the gender-based violence, sometimes they are not ready to tell their stories to us, you know, because this is not of our advantage, because it makes us difficult to write a good story that can rescue maybe the victim from the situation. But we also understand that this is caused partially by the fact that the victim is fearing to expand more her problems to get it published. So they don't agree to speak more about their problems. We also have challenges in our media houses. Yeah, because, you know, in our media houses, especially in Tanzania, I would say we don't have gender policies to govern the media houses. So this is also a problem, and according to the gender audit, which was conducted by TAMWA is Tanzania Media Women Association of Tanzania, it says that all media houses do not have gender policy. So this problem goes further to the level of reporting stories, because, you know, gender-based violence, when they reach the editor's desk, they don't get enough attention. And furthermore, important aspects that may be edited by editors who are not gender sensitive, I would say, it makes the final copy of the story to come out with little weight, because a lot of issues will be edited. And the final copy will come up with little weight for action to be taken. Yeah, so my proposals now to these women bridges is digital literacy training across group of journalists is very important. We need to have these trainings. We need to have these trainings so that to build the capacity of not only journalists, but also women in politics, in order to make them, capable to face the online space the way they can minimize being subjected to online gender violence. Yeah, and also they need to integrate men in movement, because, you know, men need to get involved, because this issue needs both gender for effective results. Because if we leave the matter to women alone, this can widen the gender divide, contrary to the right of safe online spaces for all. So that's what I would like to contribute for now. Thank you very much.
Bueno, todas ellas han sido muy rigurosas con el tiempo para tener ahora un poco de tiempo para poder debatir, ¿no? Para que podáis preguntar. Tenéis la ocasión de profundizar en muchas de las cosas que ellas han estado comentando, y yo tengo también preguntas, claro. Bueno, si queréis, ahí he visto una primera mano, no sé cómo funciona, si hay un micro por ahí. Sí, ahora llega. También. Vale. Allí primero, aquí, delante, aquí delante.
Thank you very much for all the stories that you have told us. I just wanted to find out, especially about, you know, when you exist in a dictatorship, the working of the media is very different, because you will find that there are journalists on the other side and others on the other side. We have had journalists in Zimbabwe being arrested for tweeting. And maybe even what you have spoken about, we have had journalists actually being arrested for going outside the country and talking about it. What I wanted to find out is, in those types of environments, we have also recognized that the media is also accused of misquoting. How do you deal with situations like that, especially when you are a woman? Because they will body shame you, they will go on social media and do all sorts of things. I know Rosebell spoke about the 45 plus are not on social media. There is a reason why. Getting onto social media, you are cyberbullied. And you know social media will not forget. Your children will read about some of the things that you are, that are used to attack you. And in most cases, we would rather keep away and work offline, because at the end of the day, you are distracted from the work that you are supposed to be doing when you have to deal with situations like that.
Vamos a coger, we are going to take some questions, okay, just to allow, yeah. Aquí, vamos a hacer así. Aquí.
D'abord, je tiens à féliciter toutes ces journalistes et je m'adresse spécialement à notre journaliste sud-africaine. Vous savez, en tant qu'experte en droits humains, la corruption est une atteinte flagrante aux droits de l'homme. Et je vous félicite, vous avez un visage angélique, vous n'avez pas fait marche arrière malgré les intimidations que vous avez subies, etc. Et je voudrais savoir, est-ce que vous êtes dans un pays qui a combattu l'apartheid, et donc est-ce que vous avez une corporation de journalistes? Est-ce qu'il y a une certaine protection? Le Sud-Afrique, votre pays fait partie des Nations Unies, donc il y a une protection internationale. Est-ce que, je voulais savoir s'il y a une corporation, comment on peut vous protéger? Je vous remercie.
Hi, thank you so much. And I highly appreciated the several communication by the different ladies journalists. I would like to ask Varanasi especially, because I have been closely following what happened with the Gupta scandal in South Africa that has touched the ANC mainly. What about the position adopted by the Democratic Alliance in South Africa? And what were the follow-up of the scandal? I do remember perfectly that McKinsey just said they compensate. I don't know if they have done it. Is it enough? Is it enough to the damage caused to the economy and to the freedom of the press in South Africa? And what about the other scandal that was also involved with the Rice family, Mo Rice and his brothers? The guy in Durban selling weapons and buying arms, etc., that they were also involved in some sort of a scandal of corruption. And I would like to congratulate you, because I know very well those places, and some names there, like Matuteka and Mo Rice, etc. So really, my congratulations for your courage. And this is for us a role model. For everyone in Africa, we have had some issues in Algeria for corruption. And when you have corrupt people, you have also people who corrupt them. And we know it's always with the big enterprises and the big money and the international corporation.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, there's a lot of questions coming in. Allí está la señora. Yeah, then we go this way.
Merci. Je suis de Madagascar. Je voudrais féliciter les panélistes. Mais maintenant, si on parle de communication, de journalisme, comment communiquer et défendre la voix des femmes à travers les médias, je trouve aussi, de par le développement des réseaux sociaux, tout le monde devient journaliste, tout le monde communique. Et dans mon pays, par exemple, ce sont les lanceurs d'alerte qui ont fait qu'un ministre a perdu sa place. Et donc, je me demande comment vous gérez votre place en tant que journaliste professionnel par rapport au développement trop de ces gens qui sont des Facebookers. Et avec les réseaux, vous savez très bien qu'on peut détruire la réputation d'une femme, ou on peut véhiculer aussi des informations qui sont fausses. Et donc, je me demande, votre place maintenant, c'est vraiment la limite. Comment on peut gérer ça? Merci.
Por aquí. Teníamos aquí delante. Hacemos así y luego voy para atrás. Sí, sí, lo he visto.
Sorry.
I think it will only be appropriate for us to ask this session to have 1 minute standing up silence for Shireen Abu Aql, who was assassinated in cold-blooded, assassination, communicating about the situation in Palestine of the Palestinian rights. And she was wearing the jacket for the press and helmet and everything. Please, no. Stand up for her, please.
She's going there. She's coming back.
Merci beaucoup pour la parole. Je vous félicite, mes chers consoeurs journalistes. Moi, je suis journaliste depuis 20 ans, spécialisée dans les zones de conflit. Et donc, je sais ce que c'est. J'ai été menacée à plusieurs reprises. On m'a tiré dessus à plusieurs reprises. Mais je ne sais pas ce qui s'est passé. Je n'ai jamais reçu de balles. Alors, je comprends très bien votre travail. C'est vraiment être femme africaine, journaliste, c'est très dangereux. C'est vraiment osé. Et c'est un travail où il faut avoir la passion pour faire ces travails-là. C'est un travail où on ne peut jamais avoir l'argent, on ne s'enrichit pas à être journaliste, un très mauvais salaire, parce qu'il n'y a jamais eu de subvention de l'État pour nos maisons de presse ou bien tous les travaux que nous faisons. Et donc, c'est un engagement. Merci beaucoup, franchement, vous êtes des anges. Alors, ma question, en fait, c'est de savoir comment est-ce que vous faites, quel est votre point de vue par rapport à ce qu'on appelle journaliste engagé? Parce que dans la déontologie, à l'école, on nous apprend, à l'école du journaliste, qu'un journaliste doit être neutre. La neutralité n'existe pas. Ça, c'est un fait. Alors, quel est votre point de vue par rapport au journalisme engagé? C'est ce qu'on appelle journalisme de paix. Quel est votre point de vue par rapport à ça? Est-ce que vous estimez que nous, en tant que femmes africaines, devons développer cet aspect de choses pour accompagner la politique, pour accompagner l'économie, pour accompagner toute la vie structurelle de l'État, pour aussi que nous puissions aussi jouer notre partition? Merci beaucoup.
Tu peux passer le micro là. Oui.
Thank you very much. My name is Vitória Diogo from Mozambique. I want to congratulate the ladies journalists who are doing an outstanding job, especially accompanying the evolution of technology in social media. I have 3 issues. Usually in social media, what is portrayed normally are bad, shocking things, which are reality. But how to portray successful stories so that will give hope to the people. I think that it is important to find a balance between what is going wrong and what is going good, so that we'll build a balanced society. The other issue we have, I think it is a challenge. I was listening attentively how to build a bridge among generations in social media, because we are having young people coming, but there are more experienced people who are not in social media and have a voice, they have experience. What kind of mechanisms could be established? And last, about ethics in journalism and corruption within the journalists, because some of them are easy to be paid to assassinate characters of people who are doing well. So what are your thoughts about this? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We all agree that, of course, press freedom is a strong pillar of democracy. And like movies, they are a powerful weapon in shaping public opinion, denouncing corruption, injustice, government shortcomings, etc. However, money launderers and corrupt politicians, corrupt businessmen have understood the power of media and invested in media outlets. In Tunisia, just after the revolution, where we had all dreams for a better life, for a freedom of expression, there are some businessmen, corrupt politicians, they exist, that have seized the opportunity and bought their own, invested money in their own outlets, and then they directed public opinion where they wanted them. They used media and abused it. They used it also to stain the reputation of people who are fighting corruption, of people who want ethics and who are ethical in politics. Now, the problem is this is at a national level, but we all know that at an international level, this is also true, because when you control the media, you control people, and this is what is happening in international conflicts. We stress certain conflicts, we underplay others, etc. As far as women issues are concerned, and I finish with this, I know, we have a big problem because there are very few journalists who are proficient and know and write through gendered lenses. What can we do about that?
I'm going to say, there's one behind you. Yeah. I know it's a lot, but look how many hands are there. So we're just going to say one more, and then you can answer, okay? Just give you just one more.
Thank you very much. And thank you to all you great ladies for the work that you're doing. I just want to say that a lot of women are interested in politics, but because of the bad press and the insults and the way things are twisted, when I was a minister for gender, I came to the UN and I met a wonderful lady from Liberia who was the gender minister at the time, and she had albinism. So when I went back home, I said, look, it's okay to be different. And that I met this great woman. And here in Ghana, we have a minister who also has a similar condition. And the journalist took me on that I was disrespecting him, and that I shouldn't have said that he had albinism. And they twisted everything round. And I felt so disgruntled with the journalists that trying to make good, they turned it into bad. I know that bad news sells, but how about the good that is lost in presenting the bad? What can we do to get women to overcome the negativity that the media presents? And the other issue is that in my country, a lot of the media people are interested in their own opinion. And so it doesn't matter what you say, they will twist it how they want to twist it and give it a different slant. We have issues of child marriage, of FGM and what have you. How do we get them to speak to what the women's issues are without twisting it wrongly?
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we are going to stop here for the questions. Vamos a parar un momento para las preguntas, para que puedan contestar. Lo que sí que os pediría es que no repitáis, o sea, que intentéis escucharos entre vosotras para que cuando algunas ya estén contestando, pues podáis contestar otras. Un momento. Y luego empezaré por aquí, ¿vale? Iré para atrás. Sí, perdón.
Okay. Hi, I would like to respond to the points from the last speaker. I think it's important for women to understand the risks that they're exposed to for the different careers that they choose to go into. As a woman, culturally, you're not supposed to be heard. So when you dare to challenge that, there's a lot of backlash. Even for us as journalists, you know, you're not in the newsroom, you're not likely to be assigned a role where you're reporting politics, because they think that that's, sorry. I should switch this off, sorry. So because they think it's only men who should report politics. And then when you take on a male politician, you know, you're condemned for that. Or you do some stories that I've been told that I was slept with, I was given money to do a story that exposed them local government chairman who didn't do MDG projects right. And my life was at risk. And I said, if that's what it's going to cost me to tell the truth, I will tell the truth. And in doing that, I wrote for print. I got video, I got a TV station involved in that story because it was no longer about me, it was about the people I was reporting on. So once the TV told that story, it changed the dynamics and the man was forced to do what he had to do. It's important that we actually do understand that you will be body shamed, you'll be called a prostitute, your mothers will be abused, your children will be exposed to these dangers. So it is your responsibility to protect your family the best that you can. But you must understand, and with this era of social media, there's just as much that you can do. And you have albino, I'm fat. It's who I am. I will tease myself before you tease me. So we have to come with that mindset that what I am is not, what you see of me is not what is in my head or what my capacity is. But we need to come to that understanding and acceptance. I think that's the first step to be able to rebuff, you know, the external criticisms. But that they will not come, that's kidding ourselves. They will come. But we need to first of all appreciate that they will come. Okay, so I'll leave you to respond to yours.
Thanks for all the questions. I'd like to start off by responding to Justina's comments, along with the lady from Tunisia. I don't know your name. And I think what you both are highlighting is that it's good and well to talk about journalism and the importance of journalism, but how do we practically do that in societies that are excessively repressed and in societies where powerful figures are swaying things in their favor? And I think this is a larger question than these countries. As I said in my presentation, over 40% of the world is living in countries without free media. Are we just going to leave them to this? And the larger question about media is not that it's not just the fact that there are attacks on media. Even media in a completely free society is under enormous strain in this day and age because of the business model collapsing for media, right? Advertising revenue, which once drove journalism and funded journalism, has been mopped up by giant, Silicon Valley corporations, Search and Social, and they use our content, but we don't get any money. They use our content to make money, but we don't get money. And this is a battle being fought elsewhere, but how do we fund journalism? How do we fund good journalism? And so what needs to happen is something that Vanessa was speaking about too, the pressure on funding. Now, there are global bodies who are realizing that grant funding journalism is critical. And this is starting to become more of a discussion in the philanthropy space. And I think we as individuals need to put pressure to say we need a funded body to take on what is happening in Tunisia, because you know what? Powerful business people are directing the conversation towards their interests. We need that in Zimbabwe, because you know what? We're throwing journalists in jail and arresting them for telling the truth. And we know what's happening in Zimbabwe. It's disgusting. We need it in countries that do not have this. And I mean, what Kabi has done in DRC with Radio Okapi is incredible. And that was a funded organization. I mean, where are you going to run something like that with advertising revenue or subscriptions? So we forget to talk about the money aspect, but you need philanthropic help to get it going. Okay, that was just my response to those things. There were some questions for me. Is there a body to protect journalists in South Africa? Who asked that? Somewhere here. Yes, we are fortunate in that we are still a constitutional democracy despite many attacks on it. And we have a body that I was part of called the South African National Editors Forum that is largely respected. And the older journalists from my country will always tell us younger journalists, as soon as they start to impinge on your freedom, even if it's this much, you squeal and you shout as loudly as possible. Because if you give this much, they will take this much. So every time they try to come after our freedoms, they try to pass different bills. A media tribunal was a big one they tried to pass. We made a huge fuss about it and got them to back down. And we established our own mechanism for complaints for things like a minister's words being twisted, we established an ombudsman, an internal ombudsman that has representation from the public and private. And that's something journalists in countries need to start to do to empower themselves, to hold themselves to account. Like the lady who was a former women's minister said, you know, my words were blatantly twisted. And as an editor, I was ruled against in that ombudsman. I had to apologize where we misrepresented politicians because they have rights too. But we also were then able to protect ourselves. And then the last question for me was what was the DA's position? The opposition parties in South Africa, civil society, everyone fought against state capture, and they were quite incredible in doing so. And the DA, one of their best MPs, parliamentarians, Phumzile van Dam, went to the UK to challenge Bell Pottinger for what they had done in our country and got them driven out of business. They went under administration, no one would buy them. That is a global PR firm that suffered consequences for what they did to our country. And I don't understand your other question about the arms deal, but that was a huge deal.
Yeah. I think it's better if you...
Yes, yes, you can talk to me afterwards.
Yeah, I thought I should pick up a few questions regarding women not being online, and the fact that the reality is that whether you're on or offline, you're still going to be attacked. You must understand that whether you're on TV or not, you're still going to be attacked. So you better understand that communication and being online is very critical in this day and age. It's like you're not part of the conversation, you're talking to yourself. What does it mean if you can gather the courage to demonstrate, to face the police, to face the barrel of the gun, and you can't even tweet? And you leave your narrative to be defined by other people. Even when you're under attack, what mechanism are you using to respond? You're waiting for a journalist to talk to you. But that's not how media works and communications in this world. You should be able to have an outlet of your own to say, I'm here, this is what I said. Even when you see the twisted lie, you immediately respond, I didn't say that, this is what I said. And sometimes you have a recording of what you said, make it assured that when you talk to the media, you also have a recording of what is being said. You can produce that. This is exactly what I said. You edited it, you know? So you have to understand, like, the fear factor of staying away is not protecting you. You know, fear cannot protect you. And the fact that young people also have things to protect, their families, they have things to care about. They have a future, you know, to worry about, but they show up. Because this is a fight for people's rights, a fight for their life. So you must show up. I think that it's very, very important to train our elders, everybody, to be there. Men are online. Men the age above 45 are dominating the conversation. Still passing on the patriarchal judgment, you know, being followed by millions of people. But where are the women in their caliber? Nowhere. That has to end. You cannot stay away and we only be in meetings talking and then we step out and it's men shaping everything and you're waiting for the media to come to your house to talk to you. It can't work like that. So at the same time, we can build... Yeah, thank you. At the same time, we have to build our protection, security. Then once you're there, you understand, you can talk to someone, how do I secure myself? What is fake news? What is disinformation? Otherwise, you're outside that loop. Everything is happening to you and you don't know how to even respond to it. So I thought I should say that. Lastly, there was a question on balancing good and bad. Yeah? So I don't think the job of the media is balance good and bad. But also reality in life is not about good and bad. It's important to reflect complexity of life. When I wake up in the morning and I wash my face and I go out of my house, I go through different emotions. It's not good or bad. It can be very different things that are happening to me in a day. So the media should reflect that. It's not about the rush for good, and there's been this pressure to kind of counter the bad coverage of women or the bad coverage of Africa with nice, good stories, which does not even, that's not the way to respond. It's to show like Africans, women, queer people are normal people. They have a normal day. They have normal challenges. And to humanize and show the complexity of life. It's not about good or bad. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. I would also like to respond to a few issues. There was an issue of social media that other people are doing the job of journalists. I would say they are not doing our job because we are professionals. You know, if we compare information posted in social media with people who are not journalists, you could identify that this is not from the reliable source. So, I mean, and with the mainstream media, journalists and media houses are trying. They have their mainstream media, but they have their online platforms. They have online newspapers, which they also go together into this coping with the release of quick information. Because you know, nowadays with social media, something happened now, in few minutes it's already on the online, unlike when you're waiting for the news in the evening or in the radio. So there is still a difference between professions and non-professions in the online platforms. Yeah. And again,
sorry.
Yeah, and again, there's this issue, Madame there says about how to portray good stories to make the bridge between old who knows and young who does not know. It's now the role of old who knows to tell these younger people so that they can report, because as we know the situation now, they are experts in social media, so they can report well, they know how to go about, and I think that is the way it should be. Yeah, thanks.
Yes, I'm going to say. Bueno, aquí, por aquí me dicen en la organización que tenemos que ya terminar el debate, por desgracia. Sé que hay aquí muchísimas palabras allí al fondo, en todas partes. Me parece que, bueno, para apuntarlo para otra vez, es verdad que es una mesa que requiere más tiempo y os invito a todas a que os acerquéis y habléis entre vosotras, porque tenemos que dejarlo aquí. Muchísimas gracias a las 4 periodistas maravillosas que hoy han compartido este tiempo con nosotros y que demuestran lo importante que es el periodismo en África.